Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into sandals worn centuries ago, as you find yourself standing at the edge of a glittering, rippling lake. Picture it, a city floats atop the water like some impossible mirage. The air is thick with the scent of wood smoke and roasting meat. Above you, the sky burns a dusky orange, and somewhere nearby, drums pulse like a second heartbeat. But don't get too comfortable, you probably won't survive this party. Not because of any dark twist or bloody end, but because the sheer ridiculousness of what's about to happen might just take you down with it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. Let's see just how far this sleepy little journey will stretch tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shuffle along the crowded causeway, squinting at the looming island ahead. This is Tenochtitlan, heart of the Aztec Empire. And at its center? An emperor with ideas bigger than a lake. His name is Ahuitzotl. Try saying that 3 times fast, and he's not just any ruler. No, he's the kind of guy who looks at a celebration and thinks, sure, but what if it could also rewrite the laws of physics? Fresh off a slew of military victories, Ahuitzotl has a point to prove. Other rulers have thrown feasts, sure, but he's determined to make them all look like sad potlucks by comparison. If he can't throw a party that echoes through eternity, what's even the point of conquering half the known world? You notice the tension in the air. Servants hurry along the wooden causeways with baskets of feathers, platters of cacao, and bundles of something suspiciously squirmy. Everyone seems to be moving in a frenzied but somehow coordinated panic. It's like watching the world's fanciest beehive, except the bees are sweating through embroidered tunics. Historians still argue whether Ahutzotl's reputation as a showman was well-earned or just a case of chronic one-upmanship. But tonight, standing here with your bare toes curling around the damp boards, you get the sense that the man was definitely extra. Not content with throwing his bash in a palace, or even the massive main temple courtyard, Ahuitzotl has chosen an even more daring venue, a specially constructed wooden platform that floats over the shallow waters surrounding the city. Picture a floating parquet dance floor, only way bigger and way less stable. You tilt your head and stare at it. The planks, lashed together with reeds and blessed by priests, creak ominously with every breeze. Sure, it looks pretty now, covered in colorful awnings and sprigs of fragrant flowers, but even you can tell that no good will come of putting a few thousand tipsy nobles on that thing. And a few thousand is exactly what Ahuitzotl has in mind. You're talking about warriors, priests, merchants, neighboring kings, important dignitaries, and their assorted hangers-on. Picture the Oscars, the Met Gala, and a royal wedding all crammed together, minus the air conditioning and plus about 3 tons of gold jewelry. The emperor himself is already overseeing the preparations. Cloaked in a jaguar skin cape and wearing a headdress that looks like a tropical bird exploded, he waves his hand dismissively at a crew of craftsmen struggling to reinforce a particularly wobbly section of the floor. Clearly, he has more pressing concerns, like the guest list, or perhaps which god should be thanked first for not yet capsizing the whole affair. Rumors swirl that this is more than just a party. Some say it's a veiled political maneuver, a way to show off wealth and strength without drawing a sword. Others whisper that Ahuitzotl wants to impress the gods themselves, ensuring the favor of Tlaloc, the rain god, and maybe even getting a pass on this year's human sacrifice quota. Either way, you have to admit, it's a bold plan. And as you edge closer to the platform, trying not to think about how suspiciously soft the ground feels underfoot, you can't help but admire the audacity. Or, depending on how things go, the lunacy. It's worth noting that Aztec rulers were no strangers to grand gestures. Historians have uncovered accounts of emperors commissioning entire temples in record time, or organizing flower wars. Yes, wars fought mostly for the sport of it and to capture prisoners for sacrifice. Ahuitzotl himself once rerouted an entire river to supply his capital with fresh water. Engineering marvel? Absolutely. Low-key disaster? Also absolutely. He may have flooded a few neighborhoods, but hey, nobody's perfect. Tonight's stunt, though, feels like his masterpiece. You can almost hear the emperor thinking, why settle for a feast when you can challenge the very ground you walk on? As the sky darkens to a velvet twilight, you shuffle toward your assigned seat on the platform, a low reed mat, artfully arranged between gilded benches and tables piled high with roasted maize, cacao cups, and dishes of tiny, spicy grasshoppers. You breathe deep, the air thick with the scents of food, perfume, and lake water. Somewhere behind you, a drum beats in slow, steady rhythm, calling guests to gather. The first stars blink into view overhead. You shift your weight carefully, feeling the platform dip ever so slightly under you. No big deal, you think. What could possibly go wrong? You plant yourself firmly on the reed mat, knees tucked, as the party swells around you. If you squint, the city of Tenochtitlan shimmers against the horizon like a vision, its towers and temples jutting upward from the lake's glassy surface, reflecting torchlight and stars alike. It feels surreal, and you remind yourself, this whole city, all of it, floats atop a lake. Tenochtitlan is not just a city. It's an engineering flex. Built on an island in Lake Texcoco, the Aztecs expanded their land using chinampas, artificial islands made from layered mud and reeds. These fertile floating gardens not only fed the city's booming population but also proved once and for all that the Aztecs could defy nature when it suited them. Historians still argue whether the chinampas were more of an agricultural innovation or a symbol of dominance over the environment, but tonight, looking at the distant glow of 1,000 torches, you don't much care. You're too busy wondering whether you should have brought a life vest. Around you, the platform groans and wobbles, just the tiniest bit, every time someone new steps aboard. The wooden planks, for all their craftsmanship, weren't really made to bear the weight of this many VIPs, plus their elaborate costumes, feathered headdresses, and, in some cases, ceremonial thrones. You shuffle a little closer to the center, away from the edges where the water laps hungrily, just in case. The lake itself, now more than ever, feels alive. You swear you see tiny ripples dart across its surface as if whispering secrets to the night. Maybe it's the soft rustle of reeds, or the distant croak of a frog somewhere in the shadows. Or maybe, just maybe, it's the lake quietly chuckling to itself, waiting. It's worth remembering that the Aztecs saw their environment not just as a backdrop but as an active participant in daily life. Lake Texcoco, with its saltwater and freshwater mix, was as much a god as it was a geographical feature. And here you are, balanced on what amounts to a very ambitious raft, in the middle of a sacred, unpredictable expanse. As guests continue to arrive, you spot envoys from distant corners of the empire. They come decked out in their regional finery. One delegation is draped in turquoise and shells, another in fierce jaguar pelts. A few ambassadors from rival city-states arrive stiff-backed and smiling too broadly, clearly trying to gauge how much of the emperor's wealth is just for show. Spoiler, it's not. A Hutzah has spent lavishly, and it shows. Golden banners flutter overhead, catch the breeze, and reflect torchlight in dizzying patterns. Tables groan under the weight of delicacies, cacao served frothy and spiced, platters of smoked fish arranged in dizzying spirals, pyramids of tamales wrapped in corn husks like precious gifts. There's even, because of course there is, a roasted Xoloitzcuintli, a hairless dog prized both as a delicacy and a companion. You sidestep a passing servant carrying a precariously stacked tower of drinking gourds and marvel at the logistics. This isn't just a party, it's a full-scale military operation disguised in feathers and incense smoke. There are more moving parts here than in most wars, and it's all taking place on a floating floor. Fun fact, Tenochtitlan's architects were so good that, centuries later, when Hernán Cortés and his conquistadors first laid eyes on it, they thought they'd stumbled into a dream or a myth. The city was bigger, cleaner, and more organized than anything they'd seen back home. Yet, as you sit here trying not to tip backward into the lake, you can't help but think that tonight's party is testing the limits of that engineering prowess. The emperor, of course, looks utterly unbothered. He lounges at the far end of the platform on a throne festooned with quetzal feathers that shimmer green and blue under the torchlight. Beside him, musicians strum wooden lutes and flutes carved from bone, their music weaving a lilting, hypnotic spell over the gathering. You shift again, feeling the platform tremble underfoot. Is it just your imagination, or is the floor sagging ever so slightly toward the center? It's probably fine. Probably. Another servant passes by, and this one offers you a cup of frothy cacao. You sip it carefully, bitter, rich, and spiced with chili. It's the Aztec equivalent of coffee and Red Bull combined, and honestly, you're going to need it to keep your balance tonight. Historians still debate the true scale of this gathering. Some claim that hundreds of nobles attended, others insist it was in the thousands. The truth likely lies somewhere in between, but even at the lower end, it's an obscene number of people to invite onto a floating stage. Meanwhile, the floor keeps doing its best impression of a ship on a mildly choppy sea. You have to admit, it adds a certain thrill to the evening. Will you enjoy a night of opulence and excess? Or will you find yourself flailing in the shallows, clutching a floating tamale? Either way, it promises to be memorable. The music swells. Dancers in shimmering costumes begin to whirl and stomp, sending vibrations through the planks. Each footfall sends a tiny ripple through the crowd, a reminder that the laws of physics have not, in fact, taken the night off. You sit back, sip your cacao, and resign yourself to the experience. After all, it's not every day you get to attend a party so extravagant it might just rewrite the history books, or at least sink a few inches into the mud. You lean forward slightly, the better to hear a snippet of conversation wafting through the mingling crowd. Why, exactly, would an emperor gamble so much on one giant blowout? It's not just the cost, which could bankrupt a lesser kingdom. It's the risk. One loose plank, one rogue gust of wind, one slightly overzealous toastmaster, and this whole grand stage could turn into a floating disaster. But here's the thing, a Quetzal isn't just throwing a party for fun. In the Aztec world, public spectacle isn't a luxury, it's a tool of statecraft. A party this size is the emperor's version of a press conference, a photo op, and a military parade all rolled into one. His empire, after all, is huge, stitched together by diplomacy, conquest, and the occasional friendly reminder of his dominance. You shift where you sit, feeling the platform bow slightly, a hint of what's to come. Still, you have to hand it to him. If you're going to flex, flex big. The Aztecs believed deeply in omens and portents. Public displays like this weren't just about impressing mortal subjects but signaling favor from the gods themselves. By staging a feast that defied gravity, and maybe common sense, a Quetzal was essentially shouting to the cosmos, "Look at me. I dare the universe to say no." Historians still argue whether this particular party was tied to a significant event, the opening of a new temple, a military triumph, a religious festival. The records are frustratingly vague, filled with flowery metaphors and no small amount of obvious propaganda. What's clear, though, is that whatever the reason, the stakes were high. As you sip your now lukewarm cacao, you spot a group of priests winding through the throng. Their robes are dyed the color of dried blood, their faces solemn. One carries a jade effigy of Tlaloc, the rain god, and as he passes, you catch a muttered blessing, a wish for stability, fertility, and, perhaps most pressingly, structural integrity. Tenochtitlan itself was a political and engineering marvel, but it was also precarious. Built on mud and reeds, constantly at the mercy of lake waters and the weather, the city's success was always a little miraculous. A celebration on this scale feels like tempting fate, but hey, that's half the fun, isn't it? Somewhere to your left, a minor noble stands, goblet raised, giving an impromptu speech. His words are lost to the general hum of the crowd, but his extravagant hand gestures aren't. Each sweep of his arms sends ripples across the platform, and you can see the nearest goblets teeter dangerously. You are the supports again. They're sturdy, sure, dozens of thick beams lashed together with vine ropes, but you can't shake the feeling that this is less of a floor and more of a suggestion. Still, no one else seems concerned. Nobles laugh, servants weave through the maze of legs and benches, and the emperor himself lounges, expressionless, radiating confidence. The crowd continues to grow. You spot more dignitaries arriving, each one more elaborately dressed than the last. One noblewoman trails a cloak of iridescent feathers so long she needs 2 servants just to carry the hem. Another sports a golden nose ring so large it could double as a belt buckle. Fun tidbit, Aztec nobility took their fashion very seriously. Clothing wasn't just about looking good, it was a legal expression of your status. Ordinary folks were forbidden from wearing cotton or featherwork. Only the elite could swan around in garments dyed with rare cochineal red or bedecked in shimmering jade. Tonight, the platform is a riot of color and texture, a living tapestry of power and prestige. You shift again, feeling the platform yield just a hair more under your weight. Someone near the edge lets out a startled yelp as their foot dips briefly into the lake. You glance over, just a loose plank, quickly righted by a harried servant. Nothing to worry about. Probably. Drums begin to pound faster, signaling the formal start of the festivities. Dancers file into the open center space, their anklets jangling, their bodies painted with intricate swirls. They stomp and twirl, each movement calculated to honor the gods and wow the onlookers. The platform shudders under their rhythmic steps, but the dancers move without hesitation, trusting in the Emperor's vision, or perhaps just hoping the gods are in a forgiving mood tonight. You can't help but wonder, what would modern engineers make of this setup? Probably cry into their blueprints. The Aztecs, though, had a different relationship with risk. In a world where gods demanded hard sacrifices and the calendar was a relentless churn of ritual obligations, danger wasn't something you avoided. It was something you embraced, challenged, even celebrated. Historians still debate whether the Emperor's massive floating party was a stroke of genius or hubris on a cosmic scale. Sitting here, feeling the wood flex and creak beneath you, you suspect it might be both. As the first courses are served, platters of roasted maize, cacao-dusted fruits, spiced stews ladled into bowls carved from gourds, you brace yourself for the next few hours. You're not just attending a party. You're participating in a high-stakes gamble where the prize is glory, and the consolation prize is probably hypothermia. You glance once more at the Emperor, who lifts his goblet in a silent toast. His face is calm, serene, as if daring the lake to do its worst. You tighten your grip on your cup, offer a silent prayer to whatever deity handles party disasters, and settle in. After all, you wouldn't want to miss the moment when ambition meets gravity head-on. You ease back onto your reed mat, just as a fresh round of pounding drums sends another tremor through the platform. Not enough to worry anyone yet, no shrieks, no sudden splashes, but you can feel the wooden beams sigh beneath the collective weight of the Empire's finest. From your vantage point, you can now appreciate the ridiculous scope of a Huitzilo's plan. The platform stretches wide across the lake's surface, a stitched-together marvel of timber, reed, and faith. Artisans have been at it for months, lashing logs with maguey fiber ropes, sealing the cracks with a paste of sap and ash. An ancient recipe for success, or disaster, depending on how much wine gets spilled before the night's over. And yet, as you glance at the faces around you, bronzed warriors, stoic priests, aristocrats fanning themselves with jaguar skin fans, no one looks worried. If anything, they seem impressed. Maybe it's the setting sun casting gold across the water, or maybe it's the fumes from all the ceremonial incense, but there's a dreamlike haze over everything. Historians still argue whether the platform was truly this elaborate or if the later Spanish accounts spiced it up to make the Aztecs look foolish. Some claim the floor was massive but modest, others describe it as a floating palace of decadent excess. The truth probably drifts somewhere in between, much like the floor itself. A server hurries by with a heaping platter of amaranth cakes, and you catch a whiff of roasted maguey worms, an Aztec delicacy. It's not exactly nachos and salsa, but you're not here for comfort food. You're here for the spectacle. And the spectacle ramps up as another crew of musicians steps forward, this time with bone flutes and conch shell trumpets. Their music is haunting, ancient, a sound that seems to ripple across the lake like a prayer to forgotten gods. You feel the bass thrum through your bones, and through the floor, which gives a worrying little shimmy. No one else bats an eye. They're too busy watching the real main event, the approach of the Emperor's portable throne. Yes, you heard that right. Not content to sit still, a Huitzil has decided he'll tour the party like a deity surveying his worshippers, carried aloft on a palanquin so weighed down with gold and feathers it takes a dozen muscled attendants just to hoist it. You watch as the bearers step carefully onto the platform, shifting their weight in unison, moving slow as glaciers. You can't help but hold your breath. The platform groans. The water around it sloshes. If this were a movie, this would be the part where someone's wine glass starts to tremble ominously. But tonight, all that trembles is your gut instinct screaming that maybe, just maybe, this floor wasn't built for this. Still, there's no turning back. The Emperor rides in silent grandeur past the tables, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. He offers a slight nod here, a ghost of a smile there. Everywhere he passes, nobles rise, or try to rise, awkwardly balancing themselves to bow or kneel without tipping into the drink. You notice some guests clinging casually to nearby posts and decorative poles disguised as supports, as if making a mental note of the fastest route to dry land should the unthinkable happen. Survival instinct wrapped in silk and gold. Fun historical aside, the Aztecs had an entire class of engineers called Tlachco, responsible for designing ball courts, aqueducts, and yes, floating platforms. Whether they gave the thumbs up on this contraption or were voluntold to approve it remains, well, murky. The platform shifts again under the Emperor's palanquin, dipping ever so slightly. You swear you hear a muted snap, Maybe a reed giving up the ghost, maybe your imagination. Hard to say. Ahutsav seems unconcerned. He raises a jade goblet, filled with pulque, the milky, fermented sap of the agave plant, and with a slow, deliberate movement, tips it toward the crowd. A toast. A blessing. A dare. The crowd roars approval. Goblets are raised high, spilling precious liquid in glittering arcs as they cheer. Dancers pound the floor harder. Musicians blare louder. The floor bows again. You wonder, at what point does confidence become arrogance? Historians still debate whether Ahutsav truly believed the floor could hold or whether he simply didn't care. After all, what's a little water when you're trying to dazzle gods and mortals alike? As the evening deepens, torches are lit along the edges of the platform, casting flickering reflections on the lake's surface. It's beautiful, you can't deny that. The night air hums with life, drums, laughter, the occasional plop as someone a little too drunk loses a sandal overboard. For now, the platform holds. Barely. You stretch your legs carefully, mindful of your shifting center of gravity. There's still the feast to come, and more performances, and the Emperor's grand final pronouncement, whatever that might be. But the real question, whispered on the night breeze, rippling through the lake in the wooden beams, is how much longer this floor can bear the weight of so much ambition. You have a feeling you'll find out sooner rather than later. You sit back as best you can without leaning too hard on anything, your body instinctively compensating for the subtle roll of the platform beneath you. The party, meanwhile, barrels forward with the momentum of a rock slide, except instead of rocks, it's roasted quail legs, spinning dancers, and very expensive feathered cloaks. As you watch, more guests pile onto the already crowded floor. Not just the expected nobles and their retinues, but their pets too. Monkeys with golden collars, scarlet macaws shrieking above the din, a few hairless Zolid squently dogs scurrying nervously between tables, and at least one very confused deer tied to a polished wooden post. Yes, a deer. You blink, but there it is, nibbling delicately at a bowl of squash flowers, totally unbothered by the growing instability underfoot. It's hard not to chuckle. Historians often gloss over the pet situation when describing Aztec nobility, but trust me, these people loved their animals. Exotic pets were symbols of wealth and power, and tonight, that wealth is parading around in all its barking, screeching, tail-wagging glory. The guest list, already ridiculous, keeps growing. One high-ranking merchant shows up late, huffing and puffing, with an entourage that includes 2 live ocelots on leashes and a parrot that won't stop squawking, more cacao, and nahuatl. You watch the floor flex under their arrival, a slow, complaining groan that blends almost seamlessly with the music. You glance toward Ahutsav again. The Emperor is calm, as if he can't even hear the lake grumbling beneath him. Maybe he can't. Or maybe he's just decided that if the gods want to pull him under, he'll go down in a blaze of roasted meat and gold-plated dignity. Historians still debate whether this guest overload was intentional or if things just got wildly out of hand. Ancient sources suggest invitations were sent far and wide, too far, probably, because, in true overachiever fashion, Ahutsav couldn't resist showing off to even the most remote corners of his empire. You feel a particularly strong dip beneath you and instinctively clutch at the low table in front of you. A few shallow bowls of spicy chocolate sauce slosh dangerously close to the edge, and a merchant in a ridiculous feathered hat swears under his breath as his maize cakes topple like sad little dominoes. The musicians, bless them, play on, unfazed. Drums thunder, flutes trill, and a conch horn lets out a mournful wail that sounds suspiciously like a death knell. It's getting crowded now. Too crowded. And the platform, brave, foolish platform, is letting everyone know it. The wood beneath your mat feels softer somehow, more pliant. You imagine the timbers below, waterlogged and groaning under the weight of several hundred humans, their pets, their jewelry, and more food than a royal army could consume in a month. Fun tidbit. The Aztecs were meticulous record keepers, and their feasts weren't casual affairs. Every guest's arrival would have been noted, their gifts logged, their behavior scrutinized. You wonder what the imperial scribes are making of tonight's unfolding situation. Somewhere to your right, a group of nobles burst into a loud, drunken argument about who has the most impressive feather headdress. One man actually stands up, bad idea, and lifts his towering quetzal feather creation into the air for emphasis. The shift in weight sends a visible ripple across the floorboards, bowls rattling like a distant drumroll. You watch the water near the edges of the platform lap more aggressively, tiny splashes that send cold mist onto the reeds. Servants dart around, trying to keep the party moving, refilling cups, clearing toppled dishes, righting wobbling tables, all while pretending nothing is wrong. Historians still argue about the final head count. Some say there were over 3,000 attendees. Others scoff at that figure, insisting the lake would have swallowed the platform whole at half that number. You, sitting here in the thick of it, sweating and shifting with every creak and groan, find yourself thinking 3,000 sounds about right. You spot a boy, barely old enough to carry the heavy tray he's balancing, stumble, catch himself, and keep moving. A minor miracle. Another servant passes by, handing out more pulque, the slightly sour alcoholic brew everyone is knocking back like it's the last drink before doomsday. You consider your own cup, still half full, and figure, when in Tenochtitlan. You knock back a swallow, feeling the warmth blooming your chest. It dulls the growing anxiety, at least a little. Another loud crack from the floorboards draws everyone's attention for a heartbeat, but then the moment passes, laughter resumes, the band plays on. Denial is a powerful drug, second only to pulque. You shift your weight again, slower this time, cautious. No sudden movements. The platform seems to appreciate your discretion, wobbling only slightly in response. Somewhere a monkey screeches, somewhere else a goblet tips and rolls off the platform with a soft plop. Despite the tension, despite the creaks and groans and the increasing moisture underfoot, you can't help but admire the scene. The torches, the music, the feathered nobles gleaming like exotic birds, the emperor perched like a calm jaguar surveying his kingdom, it's magnificent and absurd, and very likely doomed. But for now, it's still holding. You sit a little straighter, pull the reed mat tighter under you, and prepare for whatever comes next. After all, this is what you came for. You adjust your sitting position again, slower now, as if the platform might take personal offense to sudden shifts. Around you, the feast has kicked into a frenzy. Servants weave like dancers themselves, balancing dishes piled high with every delicacy the empire can summon. The smell is overwhelming in the best way possible, rich with the aroma of roasted duck, smoky with charred maize, sweet with honey cakes. Somewhere, someone's let loose a flock of butterflies, because what's a party without some unnecessary airborne wildlife, and they flit through the torchlight, dazzling guests already tipsy from too much pulque. Historians still argue whether this kind of extravagance was typical for imperial events or if this was a once-in-a-lifetime indulgence. Some records hint that a Hutzov's court had a flair for the theatrical, a kind of ancient version of go big or go home. But even by their standards, tonight's display is a peacock among pigeons. You eye the massive platters arriving at the long tables. Roasted turkey legs, steaming in their own juices. Bowls of amphibian stew, a particular favorite, apparently. Even tiny fish, no bigger than your finger, arranged carefully in sunburst patterns, their scales catching the torchlight. You try a maize cake, spiced and sweet, and nearly choke when you realize you've bitten into a sliver of gold leaf. Extravagant, sure. Edible? Debatable. Somewhere nearby, a nobleman loudly insists that his pet iguana deserves a place of honor at the emperor's table. The iguana, draped in tiny beads and looking utterly unimpressed, flicks its tongue and settles deeper into the folds of its owner's tunic. A flock of macaws overhead screeches their approval, or maybe disapproval, it's hard to tell with birds. Another round of dancers takes the center stage, if you can call the precarious, bowing center of this overburdened raft a stage. Their bodies move in intricate, rehearsed steps, feet pounding the wooden slats in time with the drums. You feel every stomp in your bones, like distant thunder rumbling closer. You catch sight of a Hutzov again. He's still seated like some carved idol, sipping from his jade goblet. A thin smile plays on his lips, the kind of expression that says, I planned this, even as the platform subtly tilts under another wave of guests making their grand, and frankly unnecessary, entrances. Fun aside, Aztec feasts weren't just about the food and entertainment. They were political theater, carefully scripted affairs meant to reinforce alliances, intimidate rivals, and remind everyone exactly who sat at the top of the cosmic pyramid. Every dish, every costume, every musician was another note in a symphony of power. You shift your gaze to the edges of the platform. The water that laps more aggressively now, little waves splashing up and over the first row of mats. Guests sitting near the perimeter shuffle back, pretending not to notice the rising damp. You follow suit, tugging your mat a few inches further inland, if such a thing even exists here. And then it happens. A tray of roasted axolotls, yes, those adorable salamanders, slides from a table and skids across the floor. It bumps into a dignitary's foot and tumbles off the platform with a muted plop. A few scattered laughs, mostly nervous ones. The nobleman scowls at his soaked sandals and mutters something about better sacrifices under his breath. Historians still puzzle over how the Aztecs balanced their reverence for nature with their enthusiasm for eating pretty much anything that moved. Tonight seems to favor the latter. More servers hustle past with enormous baskets of tamales, some filled with venison, others with turkey, still others with what you swear smells like roasted grasshoppers. You help yourself to one, just for the novelty, and nearly burn your fingers on the steaming, spicy filling. Another creak from the platform. This one deeper, louder. You glance nervously around. The nobles seem to have heard it too. Conversations stall. Someone's parrot squawks, "Hold tight." And for once, you agree with the bird. The dancers, ever professionals, miss not a beat. They whirl faster, skirts flaring, feet pounding a little harder, as if to drown out the growing chorus of groans from below. You can't help but admire the commitment. But the platform is definitely sagging now, bowing gently under the collective weight of too many bodies, too much food, too many gilded pets. From your low seat, you can see the center of the floor is visibly lower than the edges, forming a kind of shallow basin. And basins, as you well know, are very good at collecting water. You stick a careful finger out to test the floor next to you. It's damp. Not soaking yet, but getting there. You sit back again, resume nibbling cautiously at your tamale. What else can you do? Panic would only make it worse. And besides, you don't want to miss what promises to be either the greatest party in history or the most stylish mass dunking ever attempted. The musicians, sensing the need for distraction, strike up a faster tune. The air vibrates with the sound of drums, flutes, and raucous singing. The torches flare higher, casting monstrous shadows across the lake. And yet, despite the noise, you can't ignore the ominous, rhythmic groan-sigh-groan of timber and rope fighting a losing battle against gravity, physics, and human ambition. You catch a Hutzal's eye, just for a moment. He tips his goblet slightly in your direction, as if to say, enjoy yourself. You raise your maize cake and a mock toast, grinning despite yourself. After all, if you're going to be part of a historical footnote, you might as well enjoy the appetizers. You settle in deeper, daring to lean back just a bit against a low stool, risky, sure, but at this point, you figure you're committed to the chaos. Around you, the party shows no signs of slowing. In fact, if anything, it's only getting louder, brighter, and heavier. As dusk melts into full darkness, the torches blaze even higher, their flickering light casting wild patterns across the rippling water. A fresh troupe of entertainers takes the floor, jugglers this time, tossing flaming torches and polished stones in dizzying, impossible arcs. You can feel the platform shudder under each of their landings, a subtle but undeniable shift that sends ripples through the planks beneath your feet. You wonder idly if anyone on the planning committee for this event had a contingency plan for platform failure due to excessive juggling. Probably not. Historians still argue whether the Aztec obsession with ceremonies sometimes tipped into full-blown theatrical absurdity. Watching a man in a leopard skin loincloth juggle 6 flaming batons on an already strained floating stage, you're starting to think the answer is a resounding yes. Still, it's mesmerizing. The crowd cheers, pulses of laughter and admiration rolling outward in waves. The emperor reclines with the self-assurance of a man who believes the laws of buoyancy are beneath him. Another sip from his jade goblet. Another casual gesture for more music, more spectacle. The jugglers are followed by acrobats, who attempt towering human pyramids. The platform sags further under the concentrated weight of acrobat after acrobat clambering upward like overzealous ants. You hear the floor groan again, that same deep, warning creak, and you're pretty sure that's not your imagination this time. Some nobles glance around, fanning themselves a bit more urgently, as if a breeze could solve what's fast becoming an architectural crisis. A merchant behind you murmurs something about the will of the gods. You resist the urge to roll your eyes. The gods aren't the ones who invited 3,000 people onto a floating log raft. A parrot, somewhere close by, mutters, "Oops." The kind of comic timing you couldn't make up if you tried. Despite the platform's protests, more food keeps arriving. Huge baskets of roasted maguey worms, sticky honey-dripped fruits, steaming pots of amaranth porridge, and more roasted zolo at squintless. The servants look increasingly harried, their steps careful, their faces tight with the awareness that one wrong move could be the metaphorical and literal last straw. You shift again, slowly, subtly, trying to balance yourself on the increasingly uneven surface. From the edges of the platform, you notice puddles forming, small ones, sure, but enough to soak into the hem of your cloak if you're not careful. Fun fact, the Aztecs believed that water was a portal to the gods, especially Tlaloc, lord of rain and fertility. You can't help but wonder if he's feeling particularly mischievous tonight. The musicians, true professionals, strike up another fast-paced tune, perhaps hoping the music will distract from the wet floorboards and the slightly increasing tilt of the entire enterprise. Dancers whirl again, skirts flaring, jewels flashing, sandals thudding. You can feel it now, the slow, almost imperceptible sinking. The way the edges of the platform are lower than before. The way water slides over the wood in lazy rivulets, soaking the reeds and pooling under low tables. Historians still debate whether a Huitzotl ever noticed the signs. Some accounts say he remained serene to the end, sipping his pulque and smiling like a man who had personally challenged a lake to a staring contest, and was winning. Others suggest he noticed plenty but refused to react, bound by the iron law of imperial dignity, show no fear, especially not in front of foreign dignitaries. Either way, the emperor sits unfazed as servants now discreetly mop around him, trying to keep the illusion of dry grandeur alive. You, on the other hand, are very much fazed. You shift your weight again, feeling the platform list ever so slightly beneath you. Around you, nobles are doing the same, subtly repositioning, gathering up their long cloaks, tucking feet under themselves to keep sandals dry. One unlucky official, resplendent in a turquoise and gold tunic, steps wrong and sends a goblet of pulque flying. It lands with a spectacular splash into one of the growing puddles, and the nobleman himself nearly follows it. Laughter ripples through the crowd, a bit too loud, a bit too force. You pull your own mat back another few inches. Water is definitely creeping inward now, a slow and steady invasion. Nearby, a drunk merchant starts a raucous song, voice wobbling like the floor underfoot. A few others join in, their words slurring together into something that sounds vaguely like a hymn. If hymns involved a lot more off-key yelling and the occasional hiccup. The platform bows again, deeper this time, and for a breathless moment, everything stills. Even the music falters, the dancers freeze mid-spin, the jugglers pause with their torches suspended in the air. And then, because the gods, or physics, or sheer party momentum demand it, the music resumes, the dancers twirl, and the night barrels onward, more determined than ever to either end in glory or go down in soggy flames. You sip the last of your cacao, now watery and lukewarm, and sigh. You have a front row seat to a disaster in slow motion. And somehow, you wouldn't trade it for the world. You sit perfectly still now, the floor beneath you gently bobbing like a canoe that's just realized it's overloaded. All around, the party rages on. If anything, it's gotten wilder, louder drums, faster dancing, more pulques sloshing into the widening puddles along the planks. You glance down and notice that your reed mat is starting to wick moisture up from the wood. Lovely. You casually pull the corners of your tunic closer, trying to pretend you're not basically at the world's most glamorous flood warning. A fresh wave of nobles has arrived, decked out in shimmering jade necklaces and feather cloaks so wide they nearly knock over the serving staff. As they clomp onto the platform, you feel another telltale dip. The floor, bless it, sighs loudly enough that even the jugglers hesitate. Historians still argue whether these latecomers were fashionably late or just stupidly optimistic. Either way, you wonder if their sense of timing was less let's make an entrance and more let's make the floor a distant memory. You can't help but marvel at the ambition. Building a platform on a lake is already a flex. Stuffing it with 1,000+ guests, several hundred pets, endless platters of heavy food, and a small mountain range of gold jewelry? That's next level. Servants now hustle with buckets, trying to bail water from the sinking edges. It's a losing battle. Every bucket they toss overboard seems to be replaced by 2 more puddles sloshing into existence. And still, the nobles feast, laugh, and boast as if the floor wasn't groaning beneath them like an old warhorse. Another fun tidbit, Aztec nobles prize their honor above almost anything else. Admitting fear, especially in public, was unthinkable. Better to drown in style than scramble like a commoner. You shift your weight again, feeling a damp chill seep into your knees. Around you, the grand feast continues. Servants pass plates piled high with roasted turkey, cactus salad, and spiced rabbit stew. You reach for a tamale, which is somehow still steaming despite the rising humidity, and pretend the entire platform isn't listing noticeably to one side. You glance again toward a Hutzotl. The emperor sits calm, collected, the faintest smirk playing on his lips. Either he's completely unaware of the growing crisis, or he's exactly the kind of guy who laughs in the face of structural instability. Historians still puzzle over how much of a Hutzotl's reign was showmanship and how much was sheer stubborn willpower. Some accounts paint him as a master tactician, others, as a man who believed wholeheartedly that audacity could substitute for architecture. Sitting here, you're starting to think it might be both. Another loud creak echoes underfoot, and this time the nobles definitely notice. Heads snap up, fans flutter nervously, goblets are clutched a little tighter. A minor dignitary, seated near the platform's edge, shrieks as her chair leg punches clean through a rotting plank. She flails, saved only by a nearby merchant who grabs her cloak and hauls her upright. She smooths her skirts, nods and thanks, and pretends the incident never happened. You would clap, but frankly, you're worried the vibration might finish what gravity has started. The music surges louder, almost frantically, as if trying to drown out the sound of disaster approaching on muddy, lake-slick feet. Dancers whirl faster, sandals slapping the damp wood. Their movements spray droplets of water into the air, catching the torchlight like demented fireflies. You can't help but smile grimly. There's something heroic about this stubborn refusal to acknowledge impending doom. A commitment to the bit that's downright admirable. The jugglers are back, tossing clay pots now, because clearly, fire wasn't risky enough. You watch, half entranced, half horrified, as one pot flies wide, smashing spectacularly against the platform and sending a spray of water, shards, and what you hope is just decorative mud into the air. The nobles flinch. The emperor? Not even a blink. You feel the platform shudder under the fresh disturbance, a deep, yawning groan that vibrates up through your bones. The puddles are spreading. Your reed mat is officially more water than reed now, and the hem of your tunic clings to your ankles like a damp, accusing ghost. You think about standing up, just to be ready, but one glance at the nobles around you tells you that's a bad idea. No one else is moving. Sitting, smiling, and pretending not to notice the slow descent into lake water seems to be the unspoken rule. Another fun fact, the Aztecs placed immense value on appearances, especially among the elite. Panic was for peasants. Nobles kept their dignity, even if it meant clinging to it with soggy fingers while slowly sinking. You brush a mosquito away from your face and sigh. Somewhere behind you, a servant loses his footing and spills an entire tray of roasted fish, which skids off the platform with a splash. Laughter, genuine this time, erupts from a nearby group of young warriors, who promptly start betting on how many more dishes will meet the same fate before the night is through. You hear one wager of full turkey. You can't decide whether that's optimism or cruelty. The torches flicker, casting long, eerie shadows across the platform. You can't tell if it's your imagination, or if the platform is truly, finally, sinking lower. The water at the edges is up to some people's ankles now, and the servants have stopped trying to bail. It's clear that whatever line they were trying to hold has been washed away. You glance again at a Hutzotl. Still calm. Still smirking. As if daring the lake to do its worst. You take another bite of your tamale, soggy but still somehow delicious, and settle in for what you're beginning to suspect will be the most memorable and wettest party in history. You shift your weight again, and this time there's no mistaking it. The platform tilts beneath you, just slightly, but enough that your bowl of cacao lists dangerously to one side. You grab it quickly, because losing a good drink at this point would be a tragedy on top of an impending disaster. The crowd, for all its elegance and gold-bedecked bravado, feels different now. The laughter is tighter, the conversation sharper, punctuated with glances toward the emperor and, even more frequently, toward the wobbling floor beneath their finely sandaled feet. You try to adjust your reed mat yet again, but it's a lost cause. It's soaked straight through, sagging in the middle like a sad tortilla left too long in the rain. You can feel the wood beneath it bowing more dramatically now, the planks flexing with each shift of the mass of bodies above. Still, the feast thunders on. More roasted turkey legs, more steaming pots of pozole, more pulques sloshing into cups already brimming. Servants, bless their increasingly frantic souls, wade ankle-deep through the water pooling at the platform's edges, delivering dishes with the grim determination of soldiers storming a beach. Historians still debate how much the guests truly understood about the platform's condition at this point. Some suggest they were blissfully drunk and distracted, others believe everyone knew but chose to ignore it, adhering to the Aztec philosophy of face above fate. Based on the growing dampness soaking into your sleeves, you're siding with the latter. And now comes the entertainment escalation. The musicians switch to an even faster tempo. Drums hammer against the night air, flutes wail like mischievous spirits, and the dancers return, barefoot this time for better traction. Their feet slap against the wood with rhythmic insistence, sending vibrations across the platform like a giant, slightly tipsy heartbeat. You can't help but grin. It's madness, pure and simple. But it's beautiful madness. A troupe of fire breathers takes the stage, or rather, the center, where the platform bows lowest. They puff plumes of flame into the dark sky, lighting up the awestruck faces around you. The torches reflect in the spreading water, casting shimmering, distorted shapes that make it look like the gods themselves are winking at the spectacle. And the emperor? Ahuitzotl hasn't moved a muscle. He lounges as if this is exactly how he envisioned the night, a slow, elegant descent into absurdity. A part of you wonders if he knew this would happen, if the whole point was to throw a party so wild it would sink under its own grandeur, a fitting metaphor for a ruler whose ambition knew no bounds. Fun historical aside, Ahuitzotl was the architect of one of the largest expansions of the Aztec Empire. He wasn't just a party animal, he was a builder, a conqueror, a man who believed that bigger was always better, even if it meant the occasional flooded neighborhood, or banquet hall. You lean back, trying to take some weight off the increasingly spongy planks under you. A minor noble near the edge isn't so lucky. He shifts too quickly, loses his footing, and with a splash that silences the nearest few tables, he tumbles into the lake. There's a heartbeat of stunned silence. Then laughter, real, rolling, raucous laughter, as servants rush to fish him out, dripping and sputtering, but grinning sheepishly. You applaud, but you're afraid to jostle the floor. More ripples fan outward from the noble's unplanned swim, and the platform responds with an ominous series of creaks. You glance toward the emperor, still unbothered, his goblet refilled, his robes untouched by the chaos slowly lapping at his guests' ankles. Another fun tidbit, it wasn't uncommon for Aztec nobility to use grand feasts as political weapons. The more extravagant the event, the stronger the implied message. Look what I can do. Look what you can't stop me from doing. Tonight's party feels like the grand finale of that philosophy. You notice the edges of the platform have disappeared entirely under a thin layer of water. Guests seated there lift their legs daintily, balancing them on low stools or, in one creative case, the back of a rather patient dog. The musicians switch tunes again, something livelier, faster, more chaotic. It's as if they're racing the inevitable, determined to squeeze every last drop of celebration out of the evening before gravity claims victory. You take another bite of your soggy tamale, chew thoughtfully, and wonder if anyone else is considering whether they can swim in full ceremonial dress. Spoiler, they can't. Another nobleman loses his balance, skidding on the wet boards and landing flat on his back with a tremendous splash. This time, the laughter is tinged with a hint of hysteria. You can feel it, the tipping point, literal and figurative, is close. You glance down and realize your mat is now fully afloat, bobbing gently like a very ineffective raft. You sigh, roll it up, what's the point anymore, and tuck it under your arm. Historians still debate whether Ahuitzotl's feast was remembered as a triumph or a cautionary tale. Some chroniclers praised the emperor's audacity, others mocked his hubris. But here, tonight, in the thick of it, it feels less like a disaster and more like a dare fulfilled, a celebration so vast, so audacious, that even the earth, and the water, couldn't hold it. You lean back, stretch your legs out into the water inching across the platform, and smile. After all, you didn't come here for a dry party. You watch as the latest victim of the lake, an elegantly dressed noblewoman whose elaborate headdress now droops like a sad feather duster, accepts her soggy fate with surprising grace. A servant helps her to her feet, wringing water from her sleeves as she smiles weakly and rejoins her companions, who are laughing hard enough to sway where they sit. The party soldiers on, because of course it does. If anything, the spectacle is only growing more absurd. Guests have started wagering openly on who will be the next to take an unscheduled swim, passing clay tablets back and forth with bets scratched hastily into the surface. You shift your position again, no longer caring about the wet. The floorboards are completely saturated, water sloshing up to your calves when you move. It's less a banquet and more a wading pool now. The servants, gods bless them, have abandoned any pretense of bailing. Instead, they ferry drinks by balancing them expertly on broad leaves, navigating puddles as deep as soup bowls. A sudden gust of wind sends ripples across the lake, and the platform wobbles alarmingly. Several nobles instinctively clutch at each other, the elegant formality of the evening slipping as panic edges in. Still, a Huthsal doesn't flinch. He's a statue, regal and dry, his throne somehow elevated just enough to keep him above the chaos. He raises his goblet again, as if proposing a toast to the waterlogged masses. Historians still argue whether this was sheer arrogance or calculated showmanship. Some say he wanted to prove he was untouchable, literally and figuratively. Others think he simply refused to give the lake the satisfaction. You glance around, noticing that a few guests have already made quiet escapes, stepping lightly off the platform and onto nearby canoes, retreating into the mist like dignified rats fleeing a very expensive, soggy shipwreck. But most remain. Stubbornly. Pride outweighs common sense, at least for now. Another fun fact, the Aztecs viewed water not only as life-giving but also as a symbol of chaos, the unknown, the ungovernable forces that lay just beneath the surface of the world. Tonight, the symbolism couldn't be more literal. The Emperor's grand plan, his floating testament to power, is slowly, steadily being devoured by the very element he sought to command. The music shifts again, faster, almost frenzied. Dancers slip and stumble, but they keep moving, laughing now, the kind of laughter that teeters on the edge of hysteria. You see one particularly determined performer take a spectacular fall, sliding halfway across the platform before splashing into a puddle and popping up again, arms raised in triumph. The crowd roars approval. Somewhere behind you, a parrot screeches, more pulque. A rallying cry if ever there was one. Servants, gamely rising to the challenge, continue delivering drink after drink. You sip yours, the cup shaking slightly in your hand as the platform lists again, this time more noticeably. You spot a pair of diplomats from a rival city-state, Tlaxcala, maybe, whispering furiously to each other, casting furtive glances at the Emperor. No doubt calculating the optics of abandoning the party versus staying and risking a dunking. Another loud crack echoes across the platform. A split appears in one of the larger planks near the center, water gushing up like a miniature fountain. A ripple of nervous laughter spreads through the crowd. A few servants scurry forward, trying to patch it with bundles of reeds and desperate prayers. It's no use. The platform is failing. You can feel it. Historians still debate the exact moment when the feast tipped from grand to disastrous. Some chroniclers describe a gradual sinking, a slow, inevitable surrender to the lake. Others insist there was a single, catastrophic collapse, a sudden surrender of the platform's battered bones. Sitting here, you suspect it's going to be somewhere in the middle, a long, slow, humiliating slide into aquatic ruin. You adjust again, trying to stay centered as the floor dips further. Water sloshes around you, tugging at your ankles, rising higher. The torches flare wildly in the wind, casting chaotic shadows that dance across the rippling surface of the lake. Another gust, another loud creak, and suddenly the entire structure lists heavily to one side. Plates, goblets, and carefully arranged platters of food slide en masse into the water, a grand offering to the amused gods below. A stunned silence falls over the crowd. Then, laughter. Real, raw, unrestrained laughter. Even the Emperor cracks a grin, lifting his goblet high in salute as if to say, well, if we're going down gloriously. You can't help but join in. It's ridiculous. It's absurd. It's magnificent. The Emperor's musicians, bless their chaotic souls, start up again, striking a wild, defiant rhythm that echoes across the lake. Dancers leap back into motion, their feet splashing through the water. Guests abandon decorum entirely, wading through the puddles, their robes and tunics sodden, their laughter echoing into the night. Fun aside, for all their love of ceremony and order, the Aztecs also knew how to revel in chaos. Festivals honoring Tezcatlipoca, the trickster god, often involved wild, unstructured celebrations where the usual rules didn't apply. Tonight feels like a tribute to him, unplanned, unsanctioned, but wildly perfect. You stand slowly, careful not to slip, and raise your goblet in solidarity with the soaking, laughing, defiant crowd. If the floor's going to sink, you might as well dance on it first. You stand ankle deep in the cold, murky water, your feet adjusting to the gentle but undeniable sway of the platform. Around you, nobles splash and laugh, their once impeccable cloaks and tunics clanging like sad, bedraggled banners. The last shreds of dignity are slipping away with the puddles washing over the floorboards, and honestly, it's about time. In the center of the chaos, a Huitzal remains a monument to composure. His palanquin, raised slightly above the sinking platform, is just enough to keep his elaborate feathered cloak from getting soaked. He leans back, head tilted as if listening to the laughter rolling across the lake, a wry smile playing on his lips. The emperor lifts his jade goblet, signaling for quiet. The musicians wind down with a few final, discordant notes, and the drumming fades to a hush. Conversations cease, laughter dies down, and the only sound is the gentle lap of lake water creeping steadily across the platform. You tense, half expecting an announcement, maybe a sheepish apology or a grand proclamation about the unpredictability of the gods. Instead, a Huitzal raises his cup high and bellows, loud enough to echo across the water, to the gods who laugh at us as we laugh at ourselves. The crowd erupts. Goblets clatter together, voices cheer, and a collective, joyous madness sweeps the gathering. It's not surrender, it's defiance. If the gods want to mock them, then the Aztec nobility will throw their heads back and laugh first. Historians still debate whether this toast actually happened or whether it's a piece of later myth-making. After all, a leader who could turn a disaster into a victory of spirit would have made for excellent propaganda. But standing here, soaked and shivering, you want to believe it's true. You glance around. Nobles have given up on their soggy mats and ruined thrones. Some are sitting cross-legged in the water, their garments fanning around them like drowned flowers. Others have waited to the musicians, clapping along to a new, raucous tune that feels more like a rebellion than entertainment. A group of warriors form a rough circle and begin a stomping dance, sending sheets of water splashing outward with every heavy step. It's a ridiculous sight, dignified, gold-laden generals playing like children, but somehow it feels perfectly right. The platform groans again, a deep, pain sigh that you feel more than hear. It's sinking faster now, the weight of the revelers finally overtaking the last stubborn beams and reed bundles. The water is up to your knees, and the floor tilts noticeably with every shift of the crowd. You think briefly about swimming for shore, but where's the fun in that? Another fun tidbit, in Aztec belief, laughter wasn't just a human reaction, it was sacred. The gods themselves were said to laugh, sometimes with humans, sometimes at them. And laughter could drive away evil spirits, purify the soul, even stave off bad luck. If that's true, then tonight's gathering must be a shining beacon against the darkness. The Emperor's guards, positioned carefully around the now waterlogged palanquin, move closer, their obsidian-bladed clubs held high to ward off the rising water, as if ready to do battle with the lake itself. Another loud crack, sharp and final. A section of the platform gives way entirely, a sudden, spectacular collapse that sends half a dozen guests tumbling into the water with yelps and shrieks. You're close enough to see their expressions shift from surprise to laughter as they clamber up, dripping and grinning like victorious swimmers. The musicians, never ones to miss an opportunity, strike up a faster tune, a wild, irregular beat that sounds like a drum circle and a drunken stampede had a noisy baby. The parrot nearby screeches again, more pulque. And someone obliges, laughing, by splashing a cupful into the bird's general direction. You catch a glimpse of the Emperor once more. He raises his goblet in your direction, and for the briefest moment, it feels personal, an invitation, a challenge, a joke shared between a king and his increasingly soggy subjects. Historians still argue whether this night marked a turning point in Aztec culture's perception of their leaders. Was it proof that even the most powerful were vulnerable? Or was it a reminder that true greatness lies not in resisting chaos but in embracing it? You decide it doesn't matter. Not tonight. Not here. Another gust of wind pushes across the lake, and with it, the platform shudders and lists again, sending more nobles and their bedraggled pets sprawling. Muckas flap into the air with indignant squawks, monkeys cling tighter to their masters, and somewhere behind you, the poor deer tied to a post simply snorts and settles into the water as if accepting its fate. You laugh, genuinely, the kind of belly laugh that feels like it will leave you sore tomorrow. And around you, the laughter catches and grows, an unstoppable tide more powerful than the lake itself. The platform is sinking, sure, but no one's leaving. You hoist your goblet, what little remains of it, and toast back to the emperor, to the gods, to the madness of it all. If the lake wants the floor, let it have it. You're not moving. You sway slightly as the platform dips again, but now you're used to it. It's less like standing on a floor and more like standing on the back of some enormous, sluggish beast, one that's slowly, patiently deciding it's had enough of human nonsense. The water now laps openly at waists and hips. Some guests have abandoned all pretense of keeping dry and simply sit cross-legged in the shallows, passing cups of pulque around like it's the world's most dignified beach picnic. You can't help but grin as a group of high-ranking warriors, their once pristine jaguar pelts drooping and waterlogged, challenge each other to games of strength. One dares another to balance a full clay jug of pulque on his head while wading through the puddles. Bets are placed, hands clap, laughter explodes as the jug inevitably wobbles and crashes down, sending a frothy arc of drink into the air. Historians still argue whether this was the moment the party turned from ceremonial spectacle to full-tilt carnival. The shift is subtle but undeniable, laughter louder, movements looser, the lines between nobility and common are blurring with every splash and slip. You take a few careful steps toward the center of the platform, water swirling around your knees. From here, you can see how warped the floor has become. The middle sags visibly, creating a giant bowl collecting guests and lake water alike. Tables float free, some capsized, others listing drunkenly like ships in a storm. A Hutzal remains serenely aloft. His palanquin is now more raft than throne, but his composure never cracks. He watches the chaos unfold with an expression that could be annoyance or amusement. It's impossible to tell in the wavering torchlight. Nearby, a group of priests wade carefully through the rising water, carrying sacred objects above their heads. Incense burners, bundles of feathers, small effigies of Tlaloc and Quetzalcoatl, all balanced precariously, as if offering a last-ditch bribe to the gods. You'd laugh if you weren't busy concentrating on staying upright. The floor underfoot is slick now, the wood bowing under every movement. Every step is a negotiation, every shift of weight a gamble. Another fun tidbit, the Aztecs were no strangers to balancing acts, both literal and metaphorical. Their society thrived on a delicate dance between war and diplomacy, faith and fear, life and sacrifice. Tonight feels like the purest distillation of that precariousness, one foot in grandeur, the other slipping inevitably toward disaster. A burst of shouting draws your attention. At the platform's edge, a group of young nobles has commandeered a small canoe, attempting to load it with guests. The boat rocks dangerously as 3, 4, 5 people pile in, each trying to retain their soaked dignity. Predictably, it capsizes, dumping its human cargo into the lake with a grand, undignified splash. The crowd howls with laughter. Even the emperor allows himself a small chuckle, his jade goblet gleaming under the torches as he lifts it once more. You steady yourself against a floating table as the platform lists again. More cracks, more splintering wood. A section near the musicians gives way entirely, sending drums and lutes bobbing into the water. The musicians barely miss a beat, switching to hand-clapping and singing with a fervor that borders on joyous defiance. Historians still debate whether this impromptu spirit was the beginning of something deeper, a new tradition of resilience in the face of inevitable collapse. Some even suggest that echoes of this night can be found in the Aztecs' stubborn resistance against Spanish invaders decades later. A people who could laugh while sinking could surely fight while falling. You're not thinking about history right now, though. You're too busy laughing as another noble slides across the floor like a greased pig at a country fair, arms flailing, feathered headdress wilting into the water. It's a slow-motion surrender. The floor tilts lower, water rushing in faster now. Every few minutes, another crack, another groan, another group of nobles swimming, or pretending to swim, in the shallows. Some have given up entirely, floating on their backs, faces toward the stars, laughing like children on a summer night. Others are helping themselves to the remaining food, sitting waist-deep in the water, passing tamales and cacao as if nothing were amiss. You spot the parrot again, now perched indignantly on a floating bench, feathers puffed up, screeching what sounds suspiciously like, "Great party." You can't argue. A Hutzal watches it all, utterly unflustered. A king riding his kingdom down into the depths, refusing to blink first. His palanquin shifts slightly, dipping closer to the water, but he merely adjusts his seat, lifting the hem of his robe with one hand, sipping his pulque with the other. You feel a deep, irrational admiration for him. To preside over such absurdity with such calm, maybe that's true power. The water climbs higher, now at your waist, and still, no one leaves. A few canoes hover nearby, their owners shouting offers of rescue, but the guests wave them off, too stubborn or too proud or too enchanted by the madness to abandon ship. Another gust of wind, another deep, protesting groan from the platform. It won't be long now. You grin, shake the water from your sleeves, and sit down right where you are, letting the lake soak through every thread of your tunic. If this is the way it ends, you think, it's a pretty spectacular finale. You settle into the cold embrace of the lake water, feeling the last clinging strands of propriety dissolve with each ripple. Around you, the guests are doing much the same, surrendering not to panic, but to an oddly graceful kind of chaos. Nobles who moments ago sat rigid and aloof are now floating side by side with merchants, priests, and visiting dignitaries, stripped of their golden cloaks and feathered crowns, reduced to equal footing by the rising tide. The distinction between the empire's elite and everyone else's, quite literally, washing away. You can't help but think it's poetic in a way the gods themselves might appreciate. Historians still argue whether the Aztecs viewed their frequent water festivals as just celebrations or as rehearsals for this kind of calamity. Water was a purifier, a destroyer, a sacred reminder that everything, even emperors and their parties, returns to the lake eventually. The musicians, having lost most of their instruments to the water, are now clapping in rhythm, stomping, well, splashing, to the beat. The singers belt out rough, joyous melodies, voices rising to the torchlit sky. The few torches that haven't toppled sputter bravely in the moist night air, their reflections dancing wildly on the surface of the lake. You feel the platform shudder again, more violently this time. A section behind you dips low enough that it vanishes entirely, guests gasping as they bob to the surface like fancy, bejeweled corks. Their laughter follows close behind, peeling across the water. One brave soul, a grizzled warrior with silver bangles clinging to his arms, grabs a floating table leg and begins paddling it like a canoe, grinning like a child on his first river trip. Another guest hoists her soaked parrot onto her shoulder, the bird ruffled but unbowed, screeching yet again, more pulque, like a soggy battle cry. The emperor, still remarkably dry thanks to his slightly elevated throne, finally stands. The palanquin dips with the sudden shift of weight, sending ripples outward that unsettle the already precarious scene. He surveys the crowd, his hands clasped behind his back, and you swear you see the corners of his mouth twitch upward in a smirk. Without a word, a Hutzal steps down from the throne. Gasps echo from the remaining dry, or less wet, guests. Even the musicians falter. And then, with the same deliberateness with which he led armies in consecrated temples, the emperor strides into the water, wading in until the lake laps around his waist, his jaguar cloak trailing behind him like a dark, sodden flag. You stare, dumbfounded, as the crowd follows his lead. One by one, nobles who had stubbornly clung to their seats rise and step into the water. Jewelry glints under the moonlight, robes swirl in the shallows, sandals float free like abandoned ships. Historians still debate the meaning of this act. Was it humility, showing that even emperors bow to the forces of nature? Was it leadership, a symbolic baptism into a new era of resilience? Or was it, simply, the only thing left to do when your party had literally sunk? Either way, standing waist-deep in the lake alongside him, you feel something shift, not just physically, but in the very air around you. The laughter softens, becomes almost reverent, as if everyone understands this moment for what it is, surrender without defeat. Another fun tidbit, the Aztecs believed that life and death were cyclical, that to sink was not an end but a return. The lake from which Tenochtitlan rose was the same lake they would eventually return to. Tonight feels like a living echo of that belief. The water keeps rising, faster now. The platform beneath your feet is more suggestion than structure, wobbling and sinking inch by inch. Guests hold hands, form rough circles, bob and laugh and wade together. Servants abandon their duties, joining the impromptu baptism with grins of disbelief. You look toward the emperor. He stands tall, chin lifted, utterly at ease in the moonlit water. His jaguar cloak weighs heavy on his shoulders, yet he moves with the effortless grace of someone completely unbothered by the absurdity of it all. The musicians start a new beat, this one slower, deeper, more fitting for a procession into the underworld. The drums boom softly, carrying across the water like a heartbeat. The singers follow, their voices low and steady, a chant rather than a song. You find yourself swaying in time, the rhythm pulling you deeper into the water, deeper into the night. The torches sputter and hiss as the water reaches them, one by one going out in steamy little sighs. Darkness falls heavier, broken only by the silver of the moon on the lake and the flicker of a few stubborn flames. Around you, the feast is dissolving. Platters float aimlessly. Cups drift like lily pads. The wreckage of opulence slowly scatters across the water's surface, a fitting offering to the gods who must surely be laughing from their lofty perches. The platform sinks further, vanishing from beneath your feet entirely. You're floating now, buoyed by the lake in the sheer ridiculous grandeur of the night. And still, no one leaves. Not one guest climbs into the waiting canoes. Not one noble swims for the distant, dry shore. You tread water, feeling the lake embrace you, and you can't help but smile. Because for all the gold and feathers and ceremony, the true heart of this empire, it seems, is its stubborn refusal to admit defeat, even as it sinks. You drift now, the platform a memory beneath you, the stars blurred by the gentle, rippling surface of the lake. The water is cool but not cruel, lapping softly against your cheeks as you float on your back, staring upward at the glittering sky. Around you, the scattered nobles bob and tread, their silks and feathers flattened against their bodies, their laughter muted but persistent. It's an eerie, beautiful scene, dozens of the empire's most powerful men and women reduced to gleaming shapes in the moonlight, stripped of their grandeur but not their spirit. You blink water from your lashes and turn your head toward the emperor. A Hutzaba floats nearby, his broad shoulders rising calmly from the water. His jaguar cloak has long since sunk or drifted off, but his expression is unchanged. If anything, he looks more regal now, no throne, no gold, just the man himself, calm and unbowed. Historians still argue whether he planned to descend into the lake like this, or whether he simply recognized the moment and seized it. Either way, standing there, or rather, floating there, you can't deny the genius of it. Not many leaders can claim they threw a party so grand it defeated architecture itself. The musicians have given up entirely on keeping instruments dry and now rely on clapping, chanting, and splashing rhythms against the water. Their song is low and rolling, a hypnotic melody that rises and falls with the movement of the lake. You tilt your head back and let yourself drift closer to the main cluster of survivors. The nobles seem to have found a new kind of order. Small groups have formed, holding onto each other, supporting those who can't swim or who are too weighed down by soaked clothing and jewelry. It's strangely intimate, this sudden solidarity. No more rigid formalities, no more careful deference. Everyone's in the same soggy boat, or rather, the same soggy lake. Another fun tidbit, among the Aztecs, the concept of tequila, shared labor and responsibility, was a crucial part of social life. Whether building temples, farming chinampas, or defending the city, working together was key. Tonight, the same principle holds, albeit in a far more ridiculous setting. The emperor's voice cuts through the quiet, a low, calm command. You strain to hear it, words slipping over the water, carried by the breeze. Bring the torches. You watch as a few servants still clinging to the last dry scraps of the causeway quickly obey. They relight torches from the embers of a few sputtering ones, passing the flame carefully from one to another. Soon, the lake around you is dotted with little islands of fire, their reflections shimmering wildly on the dark water. The torches are carried into the lake, held aloft by servants wading waist deep. The effect is surreal, tiny beacons bobbing on the surface, framing the scattered, floating crowd in a golden, flickering halo. A Hutzaba speaks again, louder this time, voice ringing across the water. Let the gods see we do not fear them. It's not a boast. It's a statement of fact. And somehow, despite the absurdity of the situation, you believe him. The guests respond with a cheer, ragged but enthusiastic. Goblets are raised, or at least, soggy fists, and someone starts a chant. It spreads quickly, picked up by the others, a rolling, rhythmic cry that echoes across the lake. Historians still debate the accuracy of these details. Some accounts say the emperor delivered a rousing speech, others claim he simply smiled and drifted away without a word. Some even insist the chant was impromptu, a spontaneous act of collective defiance. But standing here, water up to your chest, torchlight flickering around you, it feels entirely plausible. The chant grows louder, stronger, a heartbeat of sound against the gentle slap of water. You add your voice, feeling it vibrating your chest, mingling with the warmth of camaraderie and the coolness of the lake. The nobles aren't just enduring the disaster, they're owning it. You spot the parrot again, now perched victoriously on a floating plank, screeching nonsense at the stars. You swear the bird looks smug, and honestly, it's earned it. Nearby, a group of warriors form a loose ring, linking arms and laughing as they tread water. The younger ones challenge each other to races, kicking up fountains of spray that catch the torchlight in dazzling arcs. You can't help but laugh yourself, the sound raw and free in the night air. It's easy to forget, in the grandeur of temples and ceremonies, that these people are human, silly, stubborn, resilient. And tonight, soaked to the bone, stripped of finery, they are more human than ever. Another shift in the water, another gentle sinking, but no one cares anymore. The platform is gone, the feast a memory, the night alive with voices and laughter and the stubborn refusal to admit defeat. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the sounds wash over you, the chant, the splashes, the distant drumming on the water. You think about what the historians will write. About the emperor who threw a party so big it sank the floor. About the nobles who chose laughter over panic. About the absurd, wonderful, ridiculous night when the gods were invited, and maybe, just maybe, decided to join in. You open your eyes again, blinking at the torchlit lake, the floating, laughing crowd. It's a mess. A beautiful, unforgettable mess. And somehow, it feels like exactly what it was always meant to be. You tread water slowly now, your limbs finding a rhythm that matches the lapping of the lake. The chill no longer bites so sharply, either the night has warmed or you've simply surrendered to it, as everyone else seems to have. Around you, the nobles are still clinging together, laughter buoying them as much as the water itself. The torches floating between the groups cast golden halos that dance and shimmer, and with every ripple, the faces they illuminate seem softer, less severe. Without their thrones and ceremonial regalia, the lords and ladies of the empire look like something closer to what they really are, people, clinging to each other in the middle of a vast, uncaring lake, laughing in the face of sinking. You spot a group near the emperor, still bobbing like a loose constellation. Someone's passed around a gourd of pulque, and they take turns drinking, the gourd floating briefly before being caught by the next outstretched hand. Even in the water, it seems, the feast continues. Historians still argue whether Ahutsahl's refusal to end the gathering was stubborn pride or brilliant theater. Some chroniclers say he was buying loyalty with shared hardship, others claim he was simply a man who knew when to lean into absurdity and let it carry him. You believe either. Floating there, your hair plastered to your forehead, your clothes heavy with lake water, you realize something. There's a strange joy in accepting that not everything can be controlled. Fun tidbit, the Aztecs held a deep reverence for Tlazolteotl, goddess of purification, who was believed to cleanse sins through confession, and sometimes, through symbolic acts like bathing. Tonight feels like an unplanned ritual in her honor, a cleansing by accident, a baptism in the folly of overreach. Another gust of wind schemes the lake, lifting droplets into the air like tiny diamonds. The torch flames shudder and bell, but they don't go out. Neither do the voices of the revelers. If anything, the chants grow louder, more exuberant. You see Ahutsahl glance upward, watching the stars blur and tremble in the moving water's reflection. Then he does something that catches everyone off guard. He laughs. It's a short, sharp bark of a laugh, but it carries across the lake like a thrown spear. The nobles closest to him join in first, cautious at first, then more freely. Soon, laughter ripples outward, a wave of sound as strong as any the lake could send. You can't help yourself. You laugh too, your voice joining the chorus. It's contagious, impossible to resist. Laughter peals across the water, over the heads of the drenched nobles and the bobbing servants and the few dignified, if very wet, dignitaries who've finally given up maintaining their composure. The torchlight catches on the water and in the gleaming eyes of the revelers. For a moment, the lake is transformed, not a place of defeat, but of shared triumph. The platform might be gone. The feast might be lost. But the spirit of the night, the sheer, defiant joy of it, burns brighter than any torch. Another fun aside, the Aztecs believed in Nepetla, the in-between place, the state of transition between two things. Standing, or rather, floating, here, you realize that's exactly where you are. Not quite on land, not quite submerged, not quite winning, not quite losing. Just being. And there's a strange power in that. The Emperor turns, slowly, wading through the waist-deep water with the kind of dignity most people couldn't muster even on dry land. He doesn't speak this time. He simply raises his arm and points toward the shore, visible now as a dark silhouette lined with more torches and waiting canoes. No orders, no grand speeches. Just a gesture. It's enough. The guests begin paddling and swimming toward shore, some using boards or mats as makeshift rafts, others simply kicking steadily through the water. The chants die down to murmurs and laughter, and soon the only sounds are the splashes of hands and feet and the occasional indignant squawk from the parrot, now perched atop the Emperor's abandoned throne as it drifts lazily behind the retreating crowd. You fall in line, swimming easily, the water cool and heavy around you. The lake no longer feels threatening. If anything, it feels almost protective, cradling you as you move. Ahead, the canoes are waiting, servants and attendants reaching out hands to haul dripping nobles aboard. No one rushes. No one panics. They move with the unhurried ease of people who have learned that some things, like feasts and floating floors, are not meant to last, and that's perfectly fine. As you near the shore, you glance back one last time. The torches still bob on the dark water, a scattering of golden stars across the lake. The wreckage of the platform drifts among them, planks, mats, overturned tables, the carcass of a once grand banquet gently dissolving into the water. And, of course, the Emperor's palanquin, with the parrot still perched atop it like a ridiculous, feathered sentinel, watching the night unfold. You smile. Historians will argue about the details, of course. They'll debate the logistics, the number of guests, the scale of the disaster. They'll miss, perhaps, what really matters, that for one night, in the middle of a sinking feast, the most powerful people of an empire chose to laugh rather than flee. You reach the shore, pulling yourself onto solid ground, dripping and breathless and grinning. And somehow, you know you'll never forget this night. The night the Emperor threw a party so big, it sank the floor, and no one cared. You squelch onto the muddy shoreline, feet sinking slightly into the soft earth with every step. The wetness in your clothes feels heavier now that you're on land, and the chill of the night air raises goosebumps along your skin. Yet, somehow, the discomfort doesn't touch your mood. You glance around at the others, nobles and servants alike, dripping and bedraggled, and smiling. The chaos has stripped them bare of ceremony and pretense. Robes hang limp and darkened with water, golden necklaces are tangled and dulled, and intricate headdresses trail soggily behind their owners like defeated banners. But no one seems to care. Instead, they move in small clusters, helping each other to their feet, wringing out sleeves, laughing quietly at the ridiculousness of it all. The camaraderie is palpable, a rare leveling between classes, ranks, and titles. For tonight, survival in the absurdity has bound them tighter than any bloodline or political treaty ever could. You spot a Hutzadl, now stepping lightly from the lake as if the water were a mere inconvenience rather than a soaked undoing of imperial grandeur. His jaguar cloak is gone, probably claimed by the lake gods, but his bearing remains untouched. He straightens his tunic, adjusts a sodden bracelet, and surveys his audience with a glance that says, "Yes, this is exactly how I planned it." Historians still argue whether a Hutzadl's silence after the debacle was a strategic move. Some say he didn't acknowledge the sinking platform at all, treating it like an insignificant footnote. Others suggest he referenced it obliquely in later ceremonies, a private joke shared between emperor and subjects. You think back to the way he laughed, the sudden, unrestrained burst that triggered the chorus of mirth, and you suspect he didn't see it as a failure at all. He saw it as a triumph of spirit, a test his people passed with sodden flying colors. Servants scurry about, bringing dry cloaks and goblets refilled with pulque. Not that it matters now, everyone is soaked through, but it's a gesture, and gestures are important. You accept a thin, scratchy cloak and drape it over your shoulders, feeling it cling awkwardly to your wet tunic. A servant offers you a fresh cup, and you take it with a nod of thanks, the pulque warm against the night's growing coolness. The feast is over, or at least the part with food and music and carefully balanced palanquins. What remains is something quieter, more intimate. Small fires are lit along the shore, and guests gather around them, sharing warmth and laughter, trading soggy jokes about whose jewelry now resides at the bottom of Lake Texcoco. Fun fact, among the Aztecs, laughter wasn't just entertainment, it was considered spiritually cleansing. Some ceremonies even included ritual mockery and humor to appease the gods. If tonight wasn't a ritual before, it certainly feels like one now. You ease down near one of the fires, grateful for the heat licking at your damp clothes. Around you, nobles strip off waterlogged jewelry, pile drenched cloaks, and stretch out tired limbs. It's not elegant. It's not dignified. But it's real. A young noble near you wrings out her tunic and sighs dramatically. At least it wasn't raining, she quips, and the nearby circle bursts into laughter. The emperor approaches the largest fire, flanked by a few advisors who look slightly less composed than usual, their finery plastered to their skins. A Hutzal accepts a goblet from an attendant, lifts it high, and with a voice that somehow carries above the crackle of flames and murmur of conversation, declares, "Tonight, the lake reminded us we belong to it. Not the other way around." A ripple of murmurs, thoughtful and amused, moves through the crowd. The emperor smiles, an actual smile, not the careful, curated expressions of court, and sips his drink. You marvel at his ease. Lesser leaders might have railed against the embarrassment, blamed the servants, demanded heads roll, metaphorically or literally. But a Hutzal has embraced the disaster, folded it into his legend. Historians still debate whether he spun this night into political gold, turning a near catastrophe into a story of resilience and divine favor. You're inclined to believe he did. After all, what's more powerful than a king who can command laughter even as he sinks? You watch as the emperor moves among his guests, clasping hands, exchanging low words, his tunic clinging damply to his frame but his dignity as untouchable as ever. The nobles respond warmly, their usual stiffness softened by the shared experience. You sip your pulque, the sweet, tangy flavor grounding you in the moment. The firelight dances across the faces around you, casting them in gold and shadow. The wetness in your clothes is starting to dry, replaced by a different kind of weight, the memory of a night so absurd, so human, that it feels like a secret only you and these few hundred others will truly understand. Another gust of wind stirs the flames, and for a moment, the smoke twists into shapes, jaguars, eagles, serpents, before dissolving into the dark. You smile to yourself. Tonight, the Empire didn't conquer the lake. But maybe that was never the point. Tonight, the lake welcomed the Empire into its depths, and the Empire laughed back. You shift a little closer to the fire, letting the warmth soak into your skin as the last traces of the lake cling to your ankles and sleeves. Around you, the mood has mellowed into something rare and precious, a communal hush, punctuated only by quiet laughter and the soft pop of wood in the flames. Beyond the firelight, the lake is a wide, black mirror. The torches left adrift have mostly burned out, save for a few stubborn flames that bob like lonely stars on the water. The platform, what little remains of it, is scattered debris now, barely visible except when a wave laps against a floating plank and catches the fire's glow. You wonder if the lake will keep the remnants or return them by morning, depositing broken planks and lost goblets on the shore like some amused sea creature offering gifts. A Hutzal remains near the largest fire, seated on a low, simple stool that seems almost laughably modest given his rank. He speaks quietly with his advisors, their heads bowed together, but there's no sense of crisis in their posture. Just the easy, companionable air of men who have been through something ridiculous and come out the other side still standing, well, floating, but the point stands. Historians still argue whether the emperor's casual handling of the night's disaster was planned. Some claim he was simply quick-witted enough to turn sinking into strategy. Others suggest that the Aztecs' respect for resilience and adaptability made this kind of graceful failure not only acceptable but admirable. You glance around at the guests clustered at the fires. Even the highest nobles, the ones who arrived in the finest gold-threaded cloaks and with entourages trailing behind them, have shed their grandeur. They sit cross-legged in the dirt, bare-chested or in clingy tunics, laughing and sharing flasks of pulque like war comrades after a long, stupid battle. Somewhere to your left, a group passes around a bowl of roasted maize salvaged from a toppled table. They joke about it being the final course of the feast, maize soup, courtesy of Lake Texcoco. Another gust of wind tugs at your damp cloak, and you pull it tighter. Across the fires, the parrot is still alive and thriving, now perched on a nobleman's shoulder, preening and shrieking the occasional garbled phrase that sounds suspiciously like, "Nice swim." Fun tidbit, parrots, prized for their vibrant feathers and ability to mimic speech, were status symbols in Aztec society. Tonight, this particular parrot has elevated itself from decoration to court jester, and no one seems inclined to stop it. You watch as a Hutzal rises from his stool, pulling his damp cloak around him. He steps away from the advisors and makes his way slowly toward the fires, his footsteps unhurried, deliberate. As he moves, the conversation's quiet. Heads turn. Even the parrot hushes for a moment, sensing the shift. The emperor stops at the edge of the largest circle, his face lit by firelight, his wet tunic clinging to the powerful lines of his shoulders. He looks less like a monarch and more like a warrior, stripped of excess, distilled down to something essential. He raises his goblet, not high, no grand gesture, just a simple lift, and says, voice low but carrying, "May we always remember that even the gods can laugh." A murmur of assent ripples through the gathered nobles. It's not a cheer, not a roar, just a low, resonant sound, the kind people make when they know they've witnessed something important. Historians still debate whether these words were recorded exactly, or whether the chroniclers, Spanish, decades later, embellished them to give the night more drama. But here, now, the truth feels less important than the fact that it happened at all. You lift your own goblet, still a third full, and mirror the emperor's gesture. All around, others do the same. For a moment, the fires reflect in the wine-dark liquid, tiny suns dancing in each cup. The emperor drinks, a slow, measured sip, and then turns back toward the lake, gazing out at the dark water that has claimed the night's grand ambitions. You think about the platform, the careful construction, the months of planning, the staggering expense, and how easily it all was undone by simple physics, too many feet, too much weight, and a god's whim. And yet, the memory that will remain is not the sinking, but the laughter. Another fun aside, the Aztecs revered Omidyatl, the dual god of creation and balance, who embodied both chaos and order. Maybe this night was their quiet reminder that both forces dance hand in hand, and that sometimes, you dance with them, even if you're knee-deep in lake water. The emperor turns back toward the crowd, gives a single nod, and steps away from the fire, his figure soon swallowed by the shadows. He doesn't need to say more. The party, if it can still be called that, slowly resumes its low hum of conversation and laughter. Someone starts a new chant, soft and wordless, and others join in, a rising and falling tide of voices blending with the night air. You settle deeper into your spot near the fire, feeling the lingering chill begin to recede. The stars overhead shimmer, and the lake beyond reflects them faintly, as if the heavens themselves have stooped to peer at the stubborn, sodden revelers on the shore. It's not the night you expected. It's better. Because here, amidst the mud and ashes and laughter, you realize something. True greatness isn't about building something that lasts forever. It's about knowing how to float when it doesn't. You shift closer to the fire, drawing what little heat you can from the dwindling embers. The air carries the rich scent of damp earth, wet wood, and the lingering aroma of roasted maize. Your clothes are drying slowly, clinging less tightly now, and your muscles ache with the pleasant fatigue that comes after surviving something absurd and unexpected. Around you, the nobles settle into something between revelry and reflection. There's no push to rebuild the feast, no frantic attempts to salvage dignity. They simply accept the night for what it has become, a soggy, smoke-wreathed memory in the making. A few feet away, a group of warriors challenges each other to impromptu contests. Who can balance the most soaked goblets on their head? Who can float the longest without moving? Who can best impersonate the emperor's stoic entrance into the lake? Laughter erupts as a tall, gangly youth attempts the last, tripping and falling face first into a shallow puddle with a splash. No one's keeping score. The prize is the laughter itself. Historians still argue whether this party marked a subtle shift in the Aztec court's attitude. Some claim it introduced a rare undercurrent of humility among the nobility, a reminder that no matter how great the empire, nature, and the gods, always had the final say. Others argue that it changed nothing except giving the empire its most expensive joke. You sip the last of your pulque, the liquid now tepid but welcome all the same. You glance toward the lake, where the remains of the platform drift like lost toys, a broken bench here, a half-sunken drum there. The parrot, having found a new perch on a noblewoman's muddy head wrap, preens smugly under the dim glow of the fires. The fires have burned down low, their light shrinking into tight circles against the vastness of the night. Yet no one moves to leave. There's a stubbornness here, a refusal to let the night end just because the feast has floated away. You catch sight of Ahuitzotl again. He's standing at the water's edge, his silhouette stark against the faint shimmer of the lake. No crown, no grand robe, just a man staring out at the darkness, as if seeing something no one else can. Fun tidbit, Ahutzotl's reign wasn't just marked by military conquests. He also oversaw massive building projects, expanding the great temple of Tenochtitlan and commissioning aqueducts and canals that reshaped the city. The man had a habit of thinking big, sometimes too big, and tonight feels like a fitting, if soggy, reflection of that ambition. The emperor turns from the lake and walks slowly back toward the fires, his footsteps deliberate and unhurried. As he passes, nobles rise, not with the stiff formality of court, but with the quiet respect born of shared experience. He nods to each in turn, a simple gesture that speaks volumes. There's a story you've heard, probably apocryphal, that a Huitzot once said, "Better to build a temple that sinks than to never dare the gods at all." Whether or not he said it, it fits. The night, the party, the sinking, it's all part of that dare. You stretch your legs out toward the fire, feeling the comforting pull of gravity anchoring you to the earth. No shifting planks, no slick reed mats, just solid ground and the quiet murmur of voices rising like smoke into the starflecked sky. Another fun aside, in Aztec mythology, Tlaloc's domain wasn't just the giver of life through rain but also the devourer through floods. Celebrating beside the water, and sometimes in it, was both a tribute and a gamble. A way of acknowledging that the same gods who blessed you could just as easily wash everything away. You glance around at the crowd, drenched, muddy, laughing, and think, maybe that's the point. To gather, to celebrate, to dare, even knowing it might all collapse. To laugh when it does. The fires sputter lower, embers crumbling into the ash. The conversation's slow, softening into the occasional murmur or chuckle. You pull your cloak tighter and lean back, staring up at the endless sweep of stars overhead. No one's in a hurry to leave. Not yet. The night still hums with something electric, something rare and fleeting. It feels like sitting in the quiet after a storm, when the world is washed clean and the air is sharp with possibility. You close your eyes for a moment, listening, the crackle of the last few fires, the soft slap of water against the shore, the occasional snore from an exhausted reveler who's dozed off in the mud. And underneath it all, a deeper sound, the contented sigh of a people who dared something foolish and glorious and laughed as it slipped beneath the waves. You smile. Historians will write their versions, each with its footnotes and arguments and guesses. They'll debate the numbers, the motives, the consequences. But you were here. You know what really mattered. You open your eyes again and stare into the cooling embers, feeling the night settle around you like a second skin. Some things aren't meant to be rebuilt. Some things are meant to be remembered. You shift in your seat near the cooling fire, flexing your fingers against the slight chill settling into the damp fabric of your clothes. The once rowdy crowd has quieted, most of the guests reclining on cloaks or directly on the ground, gazing into the stars or simply resting, eyes closed, faces peaceful. The lake behind you is calm again, its earlier mischief spent. The scattered wreckage of the great platform drifts lazily in the moonlight, the final relics of a night too bold for dry feet. Somewhere close by, the parrot stirs, muttering incoherent syllables before settling again. You chuckle softly. If anyone embodies the spirit of the evening, it's that bird, bright, ridiculous, resilient. A few nobles have gathered their strength and are rising, wringing out cloaks and helping one another to standing. There's no formal call to depart, no trumpet blast or command. Just the natural ebb and flow of the night winding down. You think again about what this night will become. Historians will try to pick it apart, will argue whether a Huitzot's sunken party was a show of bravado, a masterstroke of politics, or just a folly too large to float. But sitting here, feeling the cooling earth beneath you, you know the truth is simpler. This night isn't about failure. It's about what happens after. Fun fact, in Aztec culture, stories, tlatali, weren't just entertainment. They were how memory was shaped, how lessons were passed down, how meaning was woven into the fabric of the people. The deeds of warriors, the rise and fall of kings, even the strange, the funny, the impossible, all found their way into the oral tradition. Tonight's events, soggy and chaotic as they were, will not be forgotten. They'll ripple outward in the words of every guest who returns to their home city, in the boasts and jokes told in marketplaces and temples, in the quiet chuckles of old warriors who know that sometimes the greatest battles aren't fought with obsidian blades but with dignity against disaster. You glance over at a Huitzot once more. The emperor stands tall in the moonlight, his cloak, now mostly dry, draped across his broad shoulders. His face is unreadable, neither smiling nor frowning. Just calm, as if already resigned to being the center of a story too large to control. Historians still debate what became of his reputation after that night. Some argue it grew larger, fueled by the legend of a king who could laugh at his own misfortunes. Others insist it tarnished his legacy, a symbol of ambition too vast to be contained. You think they missed the point. The Emperor's greatest legacy might not be his conquests or his temples. It might just be the way he stood, soaked and unbothered, while his empire's finest sloshed and laughed around him. Another gust of wind stirs the dying embers, sending a swirl of ash into the air. You pull your cloak tighter, but the chill doesn't seem so biting anymore. The nobles begin to drift toward the waiting canoes, stepping carefully around puddles and mud, helping each other with an ease that would have been unthinkable at the start of the night. The parrot finally flaps its damp wings and hops onto the shoulder of a retreating servant, squawking softly as they move toward the boats. You rise slowly, feeling the pull of tired muscles and the weight of a night that refuses to settle neatly into memory. Ahead of you, the canoes rock gently at the shore, waiting to carry the survivors home. They won't carry back the gold or the platters or the lost feasts, but they will carry the story. The story of the night the Emperor dared the lake, and the lake laughed, and the people laughed louder. You step carefully onto the nearest canoe, settling onto the low bench as it rocks beneath your weight. Others clamber aboard, shifting and balancing without complaint, water still dripping from their soaked tunics and braids. The paddlers push off, and the canoe glides silently into the black expanse of the lake. You watch the fires on the shore shrink behind you, flickering points of light against the vast darkness. You lean back, staring up at the stars, feeling the gentle rhythm of the paddles cutting through the water. Maybe someday, someone will ask you what it was like, really like, to be there. You'll smile. You'll laugh. You'll tell them about the floating platform, the grand feast, the creaking planks, the laughing emperor, and the way the nobles danced ankle-deep in lake water like it was the most natural thing in the world. And maybe you'll tell them the truth, that sometimes, the biggest party isn't the one where everything goes right. It's the one where everything goes wrong, and no one cares. You let the canoe carry you farther from the shore, the firelight fading behind until it's just a memory flickering on the edges of the water. The lake is a vast, dark mirror now, holding the stars close to its surface. It's calm, silent, nothing left of the chaos and laughter but the damp clothes clinging to your skin and the lingering smile tugging at your lips. The paddlers work steadily, their strokes even and smooth, breaking the glassy surface with gentle splashes. The nobles sit in exhausted silence, the air thick with a shared understanding, the kind of camaraderie that can't be faked or forced. You glance around, recognizing faces not by their titles or their gold, but by the way they bobbed and laughed in the water beside you just hours before. Somewhere in the distance, you hear a faint echo, the last stray notes of a song or maybe just the wind. It doesn't matter. The night has already written itself into the folds of your memory. Fun tidbit, the Aztecs believed that great events left tonally, energy traces, in the world, an invisible record of what had passed. Maybe this night will linger too, not just in songs and stories, but in the very waters of the lake, in the slight bend of a reed or the way the stars seem to shine a little brighter over Tenochtitlan. You shift slightly in your seat, cloak damp and heavy but warm now against the cooling air. The canoe glides on, carrying you toward the distant glow of the city, its temples and causeways rising from the water like the spires of a dream. Historians will argue. They always do. They'll dissect and footnote and theorize about what the emperor's sunken feast meant, about hubris and ambition and the weight of water against wood. But no parchment or paint will quite capture the way it felt to float there among the wreckage, laughing until your sides ached, drenched in lake water and starlight. They won't capture the parrot, squawking nonsense at the gods. They won't capture the emperor's smile as he stood waist-deep, soaked but unbroken. They won't capture the way the nobles, so often stiff with pride and ritual, splashed and stumbled and laughed like mischievous children set loose from the strict classroom of courtly decorum. Another gentle splash. Another paddle stroke. The canoe drifts closer to the city's edge, where the chinampas, floating gardens, wait in neat rows. Lanterns bob on the water there too, tethered to poles and flickering softly, as if the city itself is breathing in its sleep. You realize, with a surprising pang, that you don't want the night to end. But nights always do. The canoe bumps gently against the dock, and you rise slowly, stretching stiff muscles. You step out, feet squelching against the damp wood, and glance back at the lake one last time. The fires are gone now, smothered or burned to ash. The lake stretches dark and still and endless. You pull your cloak tight and turn toward the city. Tomorrow, the court will wake up, dry off, and pretend at formality again. The priests will burn incense to purify the temples. The nobles will don their brightest feathers and heaviest jewels. the emperor will sit tall on his throne, the memory of the night hidden behind a mask of gold and jade. But you'll know. You'll carry it with you. The night the emperor threw a party so big, so bold, so gloriously foolish, that even the lake couldn't resist joining in. The night the empire didn't crumble under the weight of ambition, it floated, it swam, it laughed. You smile to yourself as you walk up the dock, your footsteps soft against the planks. Because sometimes, the greatest legacy isn't found in stone or gold. Sometimes, it's found in the mud between your toes, in the laughter ringing in your ears, and in the simple, defiant act of daring to celebrate anyway.